This podcast is brought to you by Ballygowan, Ireland's #1 branded water.
Yes, good on you, Tommy. Ballygowan is 100% Irish and is bottled at source in Newcastle West in County Limerick.
You're not wrong, Dunners. It's also a proud sponsor of the IRFU and the official water partner of Irish Rugby.
Yeah, we know it too well. Hydration is an essential component of elite sport, but it is also important that we all drink enough water daily. So why don't you grab yourself a bottle of Ballygowan and enjoy the podcast.
Right, Dunners, we're about to get started here, but before we do, we have to remind people we are doing a live show in the 3 Olympia on the 5th of March. We've actually got a couple of guests sorted. It's going to be a cracker of a night.
Yeah.
We're going to, it's ahead of the Ireland-France match. The crack will be good. We'll talk a little bit of rugby, but we'll have mainly more crack.
We don't want to announce the guests yet, and we might in time, but I can promise you something, right? If we had to go camping with our guests, we would be delighted to do it. So you might think of like all these kind of great names in sport. We have picked the best teammates. We have the best teammates, and they're going to be on stage that night on the 5th of March in the 3 Olympia, and we are going to have an absolute hopper. I'm nervous though. Are you nervous?
I am absolutely bricking it.
I honestly, it was on my arse the other morning because you have done it again. Like, how do you not go a week without making a gobshite of yourself on the telly?
I love how Jason, the producer, just goes like, someone texts him saying, Is he just awful thick, or is he just putting that on? No, probably a bit thick. Yes. So I presume you're referring to Catherine Leyden and me
you
doing
and
the bacon.
Catherine Leyden. Yes. So the bacon section, and I've told you this before, I'm a massive fan of that. You know what I mean? I think she's the most wholesome person in the world. She feels like everyone's lovely aunt, doesn't she? That the kind of person that you want. She constantly has scones in her pockets or something.
She does, but she's the sort of aunt that seems to tell me off all the time. You know? And yes, so this week she put myself and Alan Hughes on Ireland to the cookery challenge. Well, we just had to make bread, just soda bread. And I was stitched up, Dunners. Like, they definitely put more milk into mine. And of course, mine turned into flicking porridge.
No, because they've showed at a point you weren't listening. This is the bit.
Well, you know I don't listen.
Yeah, but she did tell you, don't add it all at once. Keep adding it really slowly as you mix it in. And then you just, honestly, you could see your pinky in the brain head just wolf it all in and then try to... Man, I'd say it took ages to get that stuff off your hands.
Oh, it's a disaster. Went all over my clothes. But like, you know, when I have Catherine Leyden on, it just makes me think of my home economics teacher.
Oh, brilliant.
So, and nobody listens to them, do they? You know, they're trying to tell you how to poach an egg. Well, no, they don't poach an egg.
Did you do
how to
home
make some
ec?
toast? Yeah, we had to do home ec. Yeah,
Oh,
I
brilliant.
was desperate. Lasted 1 year.
Can you sew?
No. Oh well, no. I think I could have sewed. Like, I think you kind of put the thread through the fabric and back in the same hole. Anyway, yeah.
The bunny goes through the hole and round the thing. I actually
I learned how to knit in primary school, actually, yeah.
No way.
Yeah,
Are you decent at it?
No, awful, but...
Would you not take it up now again? You honestly...
But you know what, Dunners? This is the show is. Like, on that morning, I think we'd gone from discussing... Wait, this is what we discussed. We were discussing what's happening with Trump, right? Then we go to the housing crisis, talk about how many houses... Then we went from there to talk what tech is going on. I want to talk to you about these new AI that can help with homework.
Yes, come on, bring it on.
Then we went to talk about how to talk to your daughters and sons about periods.
Oh, outstanding chats. Yeah, always important to have, though.
To cookery chat with Catherine Lane. I mean, you can see why my brain was fried at that stage. Just, Catherine, make me some bread and let me go sit back and put some jam and butter on it.
It's hard to get through a day, Tommy, isn't it? God love you.
Oh man, my brain is...
There's loads of interesting topics here, but can we go back to avoiding the homework? You know what I mean?
So is this on Snapchat? There's this thing called the homework genie, right? And I think you can do it in Chat GPT as well. Like, Can you imagine, like us, like there are lots of very intelligent rugby players. I wasn't one of them. Any way of getting outside of my homework, I would have taken it. So like they go on Snapchat and they take a picture of it, or you put in the question that you're being asked and it boosh, and all of a sudden it comes up, copy and paste into your homework, job's a good one. And teachers are saying, like, there are these plagiarism apps out there, but a lot of them can't pick up on this stuff.
They're ahead of the game.
Unbelievable. I am so jealous.
Yeah, I'm so jealous because remember what it was? It was borrowing someone's copybook on the school bus in. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Like you'd be there like, Ken, have you that homework done? Pass it back here.
I remember
Fiona. I had that in the German exam one time. They were like, Donncha, were you cheating in this exam? I was there. Myself and Fiona might have helped us out a little bit. She was there, read out the first line. Fiona.
Caught out. You didn't think about reading it, no.
Not a chance of it. I thought Fiona was a German word. I was there, that's very similar to our own.
I used to have the scientific calculator, and you had the lid on it, so I'd slide it off and I'd write all the equations on the back of it in pencil. And I got caught in an exam. The invigilator they would walk up and down. Yeah. So they came from behind me and I didn't see it, so I had it slid down.
Tommy,
and I'm there looking at it.
As a cheat.
Yeah, and he tapped me on the shoulder, pulled me aside, asked me to look at it, and gave me a warning, but let me away with it.
Brilliant.
You had no hope anyway.
Oh, that's amazing. Do you know what? I did physics for my leaving, and I'll never forget. Hey, like I got through as many of the questions as I could, and I knew, like, I'm honestly barely batting here at a D3 if at best. And then I thought, do you know what I'm going to do for myself? I'm just going to open the backs of the maths tables they give you, where it's all equations and stuff like that. And I just wrote down loads of different things. And it was, do you remember Russell Crowe in A Beautiful Mind? I was hoping they would think that I'm like a confused genius and that it just didn't go my way on the day. So like they were like, yeah, this guy's trying to work out, like, you know what I mean? He's trying to come up with a new AI solution to the world.
His brain's beyond us. I love that. I used to do that. Just put as much out onto the page and hope something sticks. So hopefully this is something that they can recognize.
It was always a classic in Christians. You could honestly set your watch off it. You know the way they go, the examination will start now. And you just waited for the first one of the lads to go, can I get more paper? And everyone, hey!
Did you not have somebody talking to you about our podcast and says, do you know what, you're just two lads like at the building site, just, you know, not having a clue what you're talking about, but just loving chatting. That's us meant to be talking about rugby, like, isn't it?
I got feedback on that. It was like, it's great, honestly. It's like listening to two lads on a building site with not a notion of what they're on about. I was there, that's the model we're going after.
Yeah, if you want your equations and everything else, don't be coming here.
Can I say something though? Interesting about the homework genie. That is, but your friend Michael D. Higgins, he's
got a scooter.
No, he's been vocal on the fact that he doesn't think kids should have to do homework. He thinks there's enough time within the school hours, and then when they come out, he's not saying not to learn, but push it in different avenues, something different.
100% agree. 100%.
To Michael D.
Listen, Michael, you have changed my tune now. I'm still not a fan of you going out walking around shaking everyone's hands.
Wash your filthy little mouth out with that.
Did he do it at the English match? Did he do it? I don't think he did. He wasn't there.
Yeah, maybe he wasn't. Will you check in?
That's why the atmosphere was so... Paul Byram, I want to give a shout out. Paul Byram sang the national anthem, and then Fields of Athenry. I have not heard,
amazing.
We were at the Aviva in the autumn and the atmosphere was rubbish.
Yeah.
He got the place rocking. Didn't he? From the start, incredible. It was class atmosphere at the weekend.
Of course, it's Ireland, England, but what a way to kick off the atmosphere by, the Fields of Athenry, Ireland's call, the anthem itself. It was all incredible by him. And everyone's quick to poke when the Aviva's poor, but we must say... bang on, well done. Yeah. That was spot on. Let's keep going.
Yeah, no, I actually really enjoyed it. I was buzzing for the start of the
Yeah, it
kickoff,
was.
and that's the first I've been in a long time. So well done to the IRFU, well done to Paul on that, and well done to the Irish team. To be fair, England made a good contest of it in the first half, serious performance in the second half by Ireland. We don't have much time because we have to get to our special guest from the show here. So let's quickly talk about Ireland-Scotland this weekend. Like, the team is going to be, so obviously this is being filmed on Thursday. It's going out Friday morning. The team is going to be picked. Do you think there'll be any changes?
I maybe think something in the back row. Yeah. But other than it, I think it was a solid performance. And Tommy, I'm actually not worried about selection lately.
No.
Like, I think the lads are on it. They know who they put in can perform. The only thing is this, I know this sounds mad, but this is a step up. Because I think if you make a mistake against England, someone gets you out of a hole. Whereas if you make one against Scotland, I think they've, especially in their backs, they've too many game breakers. They'll scorch us. So you're right. We need to be a little tighter. What I'd love to see, and I know this will annoy you, I wish we had more respect for scoreboard pressure. 3, 6, 9, pull away from a team. We stayed in a wrestle with England. Now I understand why we did it, because we actually we burnt the boats for them. They were wrecked on 53 minutes. And I think they've got a bit disillusioned by the fact that they're blaming their bench who didn't add impact. But England's biggest problem for me, Tommy, is their finishers, the guys that play 80 minutes. So you put on your bench, but everyone else is, honestly, they're done. They're gone. So unless they can replace a team of 15, they're in big trouble. And I think England are going to paper over the cracks here again. And they're not, like Borthwick, for me, I think is a sitting duck. He is, for me, a checkers player in a game of chess. He's not at it. But England's greatest problem is they're going to blame him for it all, and they're not going to look at the underwriting problem is that it all needs to be looked at. Their league needs to be looked at because the players are simply not fit enough for international level.
I said that I did the BBC commentary at the weekend, and I said they're not fit enough. And Matt Dawson and Chris Jones, they were quite upset about that. I said the league is, they're not getting them ready for this sort of level of rugby. And they were talking about, they were so close. But I was kind of thinking, they've lost so many matches in the closing minutes of games. Like, that's when your brain isn't thinking straight. That's when you're cloudy. You're not making that 50-50 call. You're making the wrong decision. And that's when tiredness sets in. And I 100% agree with you. I think that was the big difference.
We used to say, Tommy, fatigue makes cowards of us all. And that's absolutely what's happening in England at the moment. Those moments are always going to pull away from them. And I think those fellas aren't helping them. What isn't helping England at the moment is the denial. For me, English rugby is in a worse state than Wales. Like, you have all the resources. Wales don't. Wales don't have this player pool. They don't have 10 teams in their leagues. Like, ye have everything. And you've seen what France have done, and you're still fast asleep. It's so frustrating. England are so fucking frustrating. I'm there like this. Wake up. You're completely naked. I hope they get thumped by France so that they might, but what they will do is they'll throw Borthwick under the bus and they won't address the issue.
What I think was interesting is the guys kind of say, but what about Leinster and the private school system? But I mean, they have an unbelievable private school system. So what makes the Leinster one so much better than theirs, and why can they not replicate it? Now, listen, Conor O'Shea is the director of rugby in England. Maybe they're in the process of trying to fix this, but listen, with the resources that they have, they really, to be thinking that they're going to Dublin hoping they can take a scalp, it's a sad state of affairs for English rugby.
Just look at what they've done. Just compare it. If it was their soccer team, team had only won 2 games out, I think it's something like 9, and over the last few times they've only beaten Japan. Could you imagine what would happen in England if it was soccer? And I think all their hangers-on, pundits, ex-players have to jump off the bandwagon and stop drinking the Kool-Aid and just actually be completely honest that you're miles off it. English rugby is in a dire state, and you'll pick on Borthwick, but that isn't the problem. It is bigger than this. And you honestly, by not speaking up, you're not helping.
Yeah, moves on to the next head coach, and then they're thrown under the bus as well. They need to do what France did, because to be fair, France were in that position a number of years ago, and my God, they are completely revolutionised and playing some unbelievable rugby. We'll talk a bit more about, but let's get to Scotland, just because, like, last year Ireland won the Six Nations Championship. They beat them 17-13, close. Like, scorelines wise, you had the World Cup 36-14, Ireland won. Then before that, Six Nations 22-17, which as a scoreline doesn't reflect how tight that game is. And particularly in Murrayfield, it's going to be so physical. Like, they have unbelievable backs.
They do.
I think they're missing Tupelotu, who is a huge player for them. Unbelievable at
Tom
wide.
Jordan in the centre when he came in, man, he looks a player, doesn't he?
Yeah, but even like Darcy Graham, Van der Merwe, King, like unbelievable.
Game
Finn
breakers.
Russell, like they need Finn Russell. Like,
They do, without doubt.
But can they get parity up front?
Yeah,
like the
and
only way they're going to win is if they can try and get parity up front. That gives them a chance.
Yeah, of course, and they certainly have that. And look, they'll have confidence as well. Look, you take strength from what you've done before, and like, I know as a Munster man, we didn't always get on with Glasgow, but I admire everything they've done in the last year. I think Glasgow have changed a little bit. Normally they were all chippy away with how, and never underachieved. What Glasgow did last year was quite phenomenal, and I think that has led to competition within the squad. I don't think there is that arrogance with this squad that there was in the past that would have led to the bad blood. And you know it, Tommy. You were like, you ask us any match you want to win, honestly, over England, over any other team, you want to beat Scotland, because for me, I've always felt that they don't respect us at all. And like, I listened to the chat, you'd swear the stats were the other way around.
Yeah, totally. And listen, they have that confidence about them. I don't know if it's a demeanour, what they have. It's like they go out there and they beat England and they all of a sudden think that they should be winning Six Nations. Like, to be fair, with the squad that they have, they should be getting closer. I mean, a lot of the predictors are all saying that they could end up fourth in the championship. Who knows what's going to happen? But
well, this is the game for them, isn't it? Like, because win this, it's all on. Yeah, and I know I don't want to be this, but a Triple Crown is incredible. A championship's incredible. And we know it. A Grand Slam is hard to do. But at a point, you've got to, there comes a moment, like, and we've all been there, where you've got to front up. And this is where Scotland have to front up. Up to this point, it's been an awful lot of chat, but they need to bring the performance of their lives. It's going to be an incredible game, isn't it?
It's going to be a fantastic game. I'm confident, though, with Ireland. I do feel that there were a lot of question marks going into the match. First game up, you were so confident saying, to hell with that. Like, this Irish team, bar one mediocre performance against New Zealand, the media, everyone's getting ahead of themselves. And to be fair, first half wasn't fantastic. England, I thought, actually were showing a lot of frailties in the Irish team, but second half was close to a masterclass bar the last 5 minutes. It really was. They were phenomenal.
And Tommy, like, let's not be disrespectful, right? But young Sam Prendergast is a very young player. Like, we're
21,
we're blooding him in a Six Nations game against England. You know what I mean? We're trialling a back row. You know what I mean? We're missing key players like Joe McCarthy and Tyg Furlong. You know, like, do you remember the point? If Dricko was out, no chance. Like, genuinely, no hope. We're doing this stuff now. We're kind of, like, I look at, and I'm going to go back to it, but like, England are picking a team to play against opposition. So they pick that back row to play against us. But now they change everything for their next opposition. They don't know what they're about. They're flailing around and trying to find. We are so confident of what we are. And I'll be honest with you, I think the disrespect shown to Ireland by both pundits, ex-players, you look at any line selection from last week, there's barely anyone's in it. And like, even chat about this week, the centre combinations, you know what I mean? No one's chatting about an Irish centre going on the Lions tour, which is, for me, bananas.
That is bananas. And like, to think that this team is very much the team that's won 2 Six Nations in a row and is now looking in a good position to go win a third. Okay.
Sorry, just on that little point, I think that's what makes this team very, very dangerous. You know, when you get your time in the shirt, if you can do something historical, if you can do something that no Irish person has ever done before. We tied into it a little bit with winning the Grand Slam because it was so long. You know, whereas
61 years.
61 years.
61 years.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
but this Irish team could do something that no team ever has done. Not Irish, not English, French, anyone.
Yeah, and it will stand to them forever. That group of lads will be known for that forever. And I think that drive is bigger than anyone is giving any credit to.
Yeah, no, and I think that rugby people appreciate that as well. Okay, right, I know, Donncha, listen, it's going to be a classic match this weekend, but we do need to get to our special... Have you been putting the colouring books, reading a few books ahead of this guest?
I've been listening non-stop to his podcast. I love this man. I was lucky enough to tour with Alastair Campbell in 2005. He is an incredible person. He is so interesting. And do you know what as well, Tommy? He's so generous. We know what it's like. People always ask you stuff. I volley to him the whole time. And he's always there for me, so I can't wait to chat to him.
Well, you can tell he's a big fan of you. He's a big fan of the Irish rugby lads as well.
Yeah, he is.
And he's also a big Scottish fan.
Yes,
so
he is. Come on,
be
Scotland.
Very interesting as well. Hopefully we'll get him to play the bagpipes a little bit later on. But before we get to our special guest, I do want to say a massive thank you to Ballygowan Natural Mineral Water for supporting this podcast, The Offload. Did you know Ballygowan also has a range of flavoured water?
Ooh, delicious, Tommy. It certainly does. They are available in all types of flavour and they're always sugar-free. You want to give this one a go, I'm telling you, this is a taste sensation. Hint of orange and it's sparkling. It is delicious, kid.
I'm going for the strawberry. Right, let's
get
away
Alastair.
Alastair
Let's get
Campbell.
Alastair.
Donncha, get in the middle. Get in the middle. You're out.
Get in the middle. Am I off? I'm off. Oh, there, look at you. Well done. Thank you, Alastair.
Alastair, listen, you run a professional podcast.
Do you know what?
Rest is Politics, biggest politics podcast in the UK, worldwide probably. Listen, do you have to deal with trying to straighten people up on the shots, get the sun out of his eyes? I mean, honestly.
No,
how did you...
Well, listen, I just know because I've worked with Donncha before, and you just have to manage him minute by minute by minute. You just, that's the bus. Get on stop the steps, sit on that seat, put that kit on, go and play. I mean, that's
exactly.
Yeah.
Here comes the big aeroplane.
It is Ireland against Scotland this weekend. Big match in the Six Nations. You are a proud Scots fan. But before we get into that, how do you know about what scatterbrain Donncha O'Callaghan
this
is?
turned it into a roast, Tommy.
Because I was with him on the Lions tour I don't know how he got in the squad, but he did, and he was in the Lions tour of, was it 2005? It's
2005, correct? New Zealand.
Hold on, whatever about Donncha getting into the Lions squad, how the hell did you get into the Lions squad?
Easy. Tommy, you're making no friends. You're like, choose a side. You're either with Alastair or you're with me, but you can't flip-flop around, fella.
Well, it's a very good question, Tommy. And basically, Clive Woodward asked me to be to do the comms and the media, and I enjoyed it. I mean, the media made it impossible because they just didn't. I don't know what you think, Donncha. I think a lot of the journalists were thought, well, this guy's out of politics and he's got a reputation, and why is he doing this when I could be doing that?
Yeah,
I think there was a bit of that, and they just didn't want to make it work. And so I ended up actually worrying a lot less about the press and much more kind of doing whatever I could to kind of help the players, and had lots of great chats with the players about psychology, about media, about all sorts of stuff.
Well, this is it, because I think anybody who speaks about you on that tour speaks so highly of actually the bonding. Because listen, people would remember you, of course, the Tony Blair years with Labour. You then England went and won the World Cup. Clive Woodward takes over the Lions 2005 down to New Zealand. And who better to really rile up the New Zealand media? But because it wasn't the easiest of tours, though, was it?
Yeah, it wasn't just the New Zealand media. It was the UK media as well.
Agreed.
They really, some of them were really quite, not. I mean, I ended up. I don't know what you remember, Donncha. I probably got as much coverage as virtually any of the players. It was
you
nuts.
And Brian O'Driscoll were up there.
It was literally nuts, yeah. And I remember when we arrived back, I came off to play with Josh Lucy, and there was a load. This was at Heathrow. There was a kind of media pack waiting there. And I remember Josh said, "Right, we're leaving here because they're obviously just going to harangue you, and they did. And it was like, and that somebody had written this story about me and Gavin Henson, and Donncha used to take the piss out of me. Clive basically said I had to look after Gavin Henson because when he dropped him, he didn't want him to kind of go AWOL, and he didn't want him to think he couldn't get back into the test team. And so I was sort of, and Donncha would take the piss out of the pair of us the whole time. Oh, here he comes with his shadow. Gavin, has Alastair fed you his breakfast yet? Have you put the eggs in? It was all this sort of stuff, you know. So, but I've got to say as well, I got on, the ones that I've kept in touch with is mainly the Welsh and the Irish guys, to be honest.
Yeah.
A couple of the English guys, but it's Donncha, it's Paul O'Connell, it's Brian, it's Stephen Jones, it's Martin William. It's the Welsh and the because to be honest, there weren't that many Scots. I think there were 2 Scots, Chris Cussiter. There were 2 Scots.
That's leading on exactly where our podcast has been so far. Donncha, it is mad though, because on the Lions tours we were involved in, it was always the Irish and the Welsh got on great.
Yeah, and Alastair, we've chatted about this before, but I think we had an acceptance of meeting you where you were at, as opposed to bringing any baggage into it. We weren't.
Yeah.
I know there was people with political views and different things like that, but we came, and I think it's something maybe Celts do or Irish people do for sure. We took you for you. You know what I mean? Like, we probably knew the nonsense that other people might
good and bad.
Yeah. But that others might make noise. But we wanted to kind of get to know you, and then as well, it was just the company, like incredible company, and the lads still slag me over that. Like, they'd say they'd pass a coffee shop and they'd see the 2 of us having a chat, and they were like, "Are we in the Twilight Zone?" You know what I mean? What could they possibly be chatting about? And I remember at Alastair, you just being able to chat about the Good Friday Agreement and brilliant people like John Hume. You're like, for me.
And could you, Donncha?
But Tommy, just hearing these stories, man, you know, like there we go. Like, Alastair, you had the box seat into a pivotal time of Irish history, and I think an awful lot of us were very grateful that we could.
I think there was that, and I think with the Welsh, it was a sort of they were the same actually. The Welsh were the same, and that, do you remember that that time, Donncha, when Clive asked me to do a team talk,
yes,
telling you all why I thought you just weren't fucking reacting to defeat properly, right? and I'd said this, Tommy, I'd mentioned this to Clive on the bus. I said, look, you know, I've got to say that they've just lost the first test. And I said to Clive, do you know what I find really weird is we'd been up all night because Danny Grucock had got cited, and there was the stuff about Brian O'Driscoll being spear tackled and all that. So we were dealing with the media literally through the night, got to bed about 2 o'clock. And I remember going through the bar in the hotel, and quite a few of the players were up and they were having a drink, and they were chatting and laughing with the family and with fans and stuff. And I said to Clive, I find that really weird. I just feel that, why are they not really, really hurting, and why are they not using that to kind of think, right, sod this, we're going to, you know, sorry, your mic is hitting off your top, if you can move it, sorry. So, thank you, Jason. So, we're thinking,
Rory has a lot of work to do with you, you know that?
And you're meant to be in charge of this stuff.
I normally have earpods, right? But because you told me I've got to play the bagpipes, I'm going to have to take these out.
Will you play the bagpipes?
So, yes, of course.
Yes.
So, and I think that so I said this, and then Clive said, I want you to say that to the team. And I thought, and I said, are you sure about that? Because these are like rugby players. And I'll never forget, Donncha, I don't remember where you were sitting, but I remember at one point when I started off, and Matt Dawson told me afterwards, that's the worst possible start. He said, I know a lot less about rugby than you guys.
Yeah, never a good disclaimer.
Right, exactly. And I remember once I started going on about, and I said, you know, in an election campaign, there's always a moment when you think you're going to lose, and how do you use that? How do you internalize that to make you do the things that you need to do to maybe to try to win? Anyway, I remember looking across at Brian O'Driscoll, and he was going like that,
shaking his head,
just shaking his head a bit.
Not good.
And I looked at Martin Corrie, and I thought he was going to come over and hit me. And he said to me afterwards, he said, we felt you were saying we didn't take it badly. We did. We just have different ways of dealing with it. But what was really interesting was Gareth Jenkins, the Welsh coach, and Stephen Jones, fabulous bloke.
Yeah.
I'd say Stephen and Donncha were my two favourite human beings out of the whole trip. And Stephen and the guy that came out and they said, listen, you're going to get a lot of flack for saying that. But I tell you, it needed to be said, and it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. And so, so that was a kind of moment. And then of course, the next thing that happened, I've got my suspicions who it was, but one of the players told the Daily Mail that this thing had happened.
Wow.
And once that had happened, it was like, whoosh, away we go, and what the fuck's he doing there, and blah, 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 blah. But I did enjoy it. I wouldn't do it again. I'll tell you what.
Would you not?
Tommy, that was the time when I realised I probably could never do another communications job again. Because if you're doing a communications job, one of the golden rules is you don't become the story.
Yeah.
And I realised that if I do a traditional, conventional communications job, I'm going to become the story. What I got out of it was just the relationships and seeing top level elite sportsmen and Donncha train, how they train and how they operate and what have you. I love that.
But
we all need the fun, the clown there as well, don't we, Donners?
But Alastair, you shouldn't take away from what you left there as well. I understand it from your point of view because you were used to being around that. But it was our first time actually getting exposure to the kind of elite side of how you deal with media. Like before you arrived, none of us ever got a one-pager. And like I remember you used to give us a page on the journalists and it would have bullet points for us, never off the record, watch a throwaway comment, certain things. And then over the page it would say, here are the key messages that we're getting out this week. Like this was all new to us. And like if you look at the message, like not being hard, we probably worked in silos that whole tour. It wasn't a successful tour. All of us would put our hand up to that. But I do think there was massive effort and everyone trying to make it go well. But if you look at outcomes, like I remember one of the lads picked up the paper after the Brian O'Driscoll tap tattle, and because you're right, people were bitching and moaning because we brought Alastair, we put a bullseye on ourselves, and then someone reverted to the fact there's 25 pages in the sports page of this thing, and 23 of them are chatting about Brian O'Driscoll's tattle, and 2 of them are chatting about our shit performance. And that's down, but like that's down to you. You know what I mean? And we were there. Like if we were all performing like him, we'd be away.
Yeah, thank you, Donncha. That's very, very kind of you. I remember once walking into a bar in New Zealand with Stephen Jones, and loads of Lions fans are in there. And Stephen goes, "Come on now, lads, Alastair Campbell's here. He missed every single kick. He didn't score a single try. Every pass went wrong. It's entirely his fault. This tour is so shite."
It was amazing. It was great for us because we just blamed you on everything.
Exactly, yeah.
And do you know what? We can blame you from now on because now every rugby player gets that sheet of paper, tell them not to get off message, to just say this. So they're the most boring interviews
there is
of
a problem
all
with
time.
that. There is a problem with that. But you see, this is the thing. Just because you're on message doesn't mean you have to be boring. This is what people misunderstand. You can stay on message, you can say the right thing without being boring. Where it gets boring is when it becomes robotic. But I think for you guys, at that level, particularly the captains having to do so many interviews, they get bored. You can tell they're bored. You can see it with football managers. You see it with the football managers before and after match press conferences, the match of the day stuff and all that. They get bored.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you get bored saying the same thing 15 times?
Do you think as well, though, it's not worth it for players to give the journalists a headline? I mean, that's the other thing, because a player might be thinking something, but they know if I actually speak my mind here and tell you I actually think, I'll be castigated for it. And then it won't be me who'll feel the pressure. It's actually throwing my teammates under the bus.
Yeah, I get that. But I still think you can... I don't think you have to be robotic. I don't think you have to be boring. I think you can, particularly those... I mean, I think it's amazing how you do those interviews literally after the final whistle goes. When the adrenaline's pumping, the last few minutes has probably been a bit of a dust up or what have you. I think to compose yourselves and then just, say the things you've got to say. But I do think most of these interviews now, they've become so cliched and so kind of robotic that you just need a bit of character and a bit of personality in them. Yeah,
it's a problem. We constantly talk about it. We worry about it because we were lucky, Alastair. You got to reveal yourself a little bit, but now we're just seeing a group coming behind that are very vanilla. And I suppose it's interesting from your point of view. One of the most unique players in it is Maro Itoje.
Yeah.
And I know you've done an awful lot of work with him. You might just tell us a little bit about your relationship with Maro.
Well, actually, that emerged from the Lions tour. Richard Hill was on the
what a
Lions
man.
tour. He was another one who got injured. And when he went off to work for England, he said to me, listen, there's this young guy coming up through the ranks, Maro Itoje, really smart kid, definitely going place, but and he's very interested in politics. You know, would you sort of meet up with him? And I've stayed in touch with him. And, you know, including last week, he was like just having a chat about how you know, the difference between being the captain and being a player and what have you. He's a really, really smart guy, smart guy. And of course, and he's an interesting example of somebody who is not your conventional rugby interviewee. He never swears, for example, which is pretty rare. And he's quite soft spoken as well. He's not a kind of big shouty kind of guy. He's huge physically, but he's quite soft spoken, and he's thoughtful. So I actually think his interviews are more interesting because he's thinking about it, but he doesn't make mistakes. And your point, Tommy, you can make a headline if you want to make a headline. Do it on your terms. You know. So rugby players shouldn't think of every interview as a trap. It's not that, you know, you can get something out of it, but be clear about what you want to get out of it rather than what the journalist wants to get out of it.
And what advice did you give him? Would you give him as captain of your country for the first time, particularly going into the Six Nations?
Be yourself, because he's very, you know, he's articulate, he's clever, he knows the game, but give a sense of your own personality without it having necessarily to be look at me. And I think that's what his personality is anyway, because he's quite a humble guy.
Alastair, I see, obviously you have a massive love for soccer, but like it looks like the gap is pulling away between soccer and rugby in terms of eyeballs. Only last week Netflix decided they weren't going to keep going with this documentary they're going to do with rugby and just getting eyes on it. But I think that's the main problem. If you look at the Formula One setup, we see the personalities, we get behind them because we know them. It is a worry for World Rugby if we're guarding these players and not
and
leaving
particularly if rugby was and Six Nations was to go behind a paywall, Dunners, that's another potential huge issue.
Yeah. Look, I think football is so far ahead. I actually, as you know, Donncha, I am a rugby league fan, the head of rugby union.
All the good ones are, Alastair.
The rugby union,
Yorkshire.
The rugby union still, I think, does better in terms of, you know, the Six Nations in particular. The Six Nations does get a lot of eyeballs. And also, when you look at the crowds of both in Ireland and in England, and getting better in Scotland as well, but the crowds for the big games are, you know, when you see Saracens occasionally playing at Wembley or whatever, you know, they sell it out. So there's a lot of interest, but I think what the worry would be is that the interest is within a narrowing group of people who are maybe pretty fanatical about it. So I do think that rugby's got a bit of a not an image problem, but I think that the game feels like it needs a bit of a sort of remake, and I think the characters that is in the end down to the characters. It's like with Wimbledon, you know, tennis. I went last year, and I've got to be honest, with the sort of Federer generation moving on, I didn't know any of the players. Well, if you don't know the players, you're not going to be that interested.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, I was the exact same with the Australian Open this year. You're looking at the final kind of going, normally this was appointment viewing, but no, I listened to the result. Yeah.
Well, it's phases as well, isn't it? But I do think that there's and we're seeing, listen, you obviously run a politics podcast, but we're seeing on a worldview, the world is becoming very separatist. Everybody's looking after themselves. What you've seen with Brexit, who you've spoken an awful lot about, like within Six Nations, unions sticking to themselves, wanting to look after themselves. New Zealand rugby, South Africa rugby. Realistically, if rugby is going to go places, it's important to actually come together to try and get the best deal together as opposed to looking after themselves.
I totally agree with that. And that's why ultimately, when does the most, not, well, certainly the rugby playing world, when do they, are all they fixated on rugby? It's when you get the World Cup. Yeah. It's like, you know, so when South Africa, when the Southern Hemisphere teams are playing each other, it's massive in the Southern Hemisphere. When the Six Nations are playing, it's massive in Europe. But, you know, what I feel rugby needs to do. And by the way, I think I think you could learn a lot from cricket and what they've done, you know, because they've, and certainly in the televising of it, they've internationalized it much more, I think, than rugby has. You know, you might not watch it, but you will get West Indies against New Zealand on our televisions. So I think there's a lot to learn from what the other sports do. I think football is now so far ahead and on every level. By the way, that shouldn't necessarily worry rugby, because I think there's stuff you can learn from their success. I know more and more people who support Premier League clubs who are not going to Premier League matches anymore because they think they've become too cosmetic, too commercialized. They're going. I've got a friend of mine who he's got an Arsenal season ticket, but he's selling his season ticket every week, and he's going last week he went to Cambridge United against Wickham.
Amazing.
Because he thinks it's earthier.
Yeah, but we're seeing the exact same thing happen in Ireland. There's a resurgence of our League of Ireland. So and normally people would jet over, get the planes over and watch United, Liverpool, but they're staying at home because there's a bit of identity in it. And I'm not being harsh on Alastair, but because of Brexit, we're not losing the talent pool we used to lose. So there's good young players now in the league that can be role models.
You're trying to tell me you found an advantage of Brexit?
Well, honestly,
get on the BBC. Everybody's looking for them.
I know you've chatted at length with it, but what a frustration, Alastair. You know, like honestly, like Tommy's chatting there about us coming more so together, but. It's
well, the other thing from Ireland's perspective, I think there was a real fear because of your geographical position that Brexit would lead to Ireland kind of losing out in its relationship with Europe as well, and the opposite has happened. You've actually got closer, I think.
Well, it is at the moment, and of course they're benefiting massively from America, but Trump could be having something to say about that in the next while too. We know you've had your own issues with mental health as well, and huge ambassador for it. Particularly whenever we talk on this podcast about the pressures. Listen, there's a battle of the out halves in Ireland, a young 21-year-old Sam Prendergast up against 25, 26-year-old Jack Crowley. All week, the media, they're being pitted against each other. Every little minute of their game is being scrutinised from the weekend. You know, in the day of social media, in the days of constant media attention, do you worry about the mental health and the stresses nowadays, particularly you think of footballers as well, like these are still young kids playing at a massive stage. Like it has to be having an effect on them.
Yeah, well, I think that some of the clubs are getting better at advising players, but a lot of them, let's be frank, just see the players as kind of, you know, they're basically there to be used, as it were, and also don't forget that, you know, we're talking about mental health now. A lot of I've got a lot of friends from Burnley back in the day when I was growing up, who are former players, and a lot of them are now dead, and a lot of them have died of dementia. And one of my friends, Paul Fletcher, who was a great player for Burnley, and he was saying to me that, you know, if you just sat down with all that team at the time and said, listen, by the way, guys, because of all these wet balls you're heading all the time, and you know, you might get a few years taken off your life. He said, pretty much every one of us would still have done it. And likewise, I think with young players today who may be advised about mental health and whatever it might be, I think most of them would still do it. However, I think the clubs and the game has got a responsibility that they're aware of it. And where I feel sorry for players is that if you're like a 15, 16-year-old kid, or actually now in football, it starts at like 6, 7, 8, and you get picked, you get spotted because you're really, really good and your talent develops. And suddenly by the age of 18, you've got newspapers saying they shouldn't be doing this and they shouldn't be doing that because they're role models. When did this happen that because you're good at football or you're good at rugby, you're a role model? You're only a role model in my mind if you choose to be a role model. Now, the clubs and the unions have got to sort of protect you from that. My advice to somebody like the two guys being picked apart there, I would hope that their families and their coaches would basically persuade them just not to give a damn about social media. It doesn't do anything for you. My daughter's a comedian and
she's brilliant. Thank God one of you is funny.
Exactly. So, but she when she first started out, and you know, you get hecklers and what have you, you get used to dealing with those. But when she did her first Edinburgh Festival, you know, now there's an upside to me being her dad, because she probably got more reviewed than she would have done, right? And her first show was all about politics. But the downside is there's people there who want to have a go. And I remember this guy in the Times wrote a vicious review about her. It really upset her. Wow. And I said to her, look, why don't care about it. The guy went along wanting to make you feel like you're feeling now. Don't let it. And it's the same on social media. And I've always said to, and I think this is a good advice for sports people, if your coach thinks you're completely useless, that's a problem. If your parents think you're a terrible son or daughter, that's a problem. If your kids think you're a terrible parent, that's a problem. You know, but apart from that, just ignore it.
Yeah. About the dog, Alastair. Don't forget the dog.
Oh, the dog, but the dog will always love you.
They love you no matter what.
But you're right, Alastair. I was in the dressing room near the end of my career in Worcester, and I'll never forget it. There was young men in that dressing room taking their phones into the toilet at halftime, and they were checking social media to see. They put in their name, and they would see how other people are appraising their performance, and
people who know nothing about the game.
Yeah,
it's some guy on a sofa in his mum's, you know, kitchen. And
it's easy to say, though, but we all know we might get 100 positive comments, but that one negative comment is always the one that sticks in your head. It's easy to try and tell people to not look at it. A question
Tommy, you know whether you played well or you didn't. You know better than they know.
You're not getting away with your bullshit here, Tommy. He's got you.
Listen, I know I've had bad games as well, but listen,
exactly.
you've got the numbers on the back of the papers. You have your friends who'll fill you in on it. They'll tell you exactly how you went. But we all know how well we go. We all know that the only thing that matters is your teammates or your head coach.
Yeah.
But young kids are grown used to their mobile phones, and they are going scrolling. And listen, it's something that they have to deal with it. Like, do you think it's something, because you talk about mental health? Whenever we played rugby, there was a lot more talk about mental strength. And that actually, because if you put health on it, people are always going to, like, how's your health? You're always going to say, oh, it's not great. It's always quite a negative way where you talk about your strength. It's something that we know if we go to the gym, you have to work on. You know, if you work in the gym, you'll get stronger. If you work in your mental strength, you'll get better at it.
Yeah, but the way I frame it is I talk about having good mental health. You know, so if I feel my mental health is good, that gives me...
But what does that mean? What does mental health...
What good mental health to me means is waking up in the morning with a sense of wanting to get out of bed, having purpose, not having a pit in your stomach because you're not anxious about it too much. And it's also about... So I'm going to show you something, right? So this is my jam jar, which sits on my desk the whole time, and I travel with it. And this
good jam that.
Well, la bonne maman.
Yeah, it's delicious.
It's the best in the air, but and this was a woman in Canada who said that the way to think about your mental health is down in the bottom are your genes, that's the sediment. The rest of it's your life, and stuff swills in and out, and most of it you forget, the memories go, but sometimes you can't cope, and when you can't cope, the jam jar explodes, and that's when you're ill. And she said, we all spend our time trying to undo all this. What we should be doing is building on the jam jar, right? So when I think about good mental health, it's the stuff that I'm putting into my jam jar so that it gets bigger and bigger. Relationships, things that I do, meaningful activity, sleep, diet, exercise, my bagpipes, my books, my dog, Burnley Football Club.
Burnley, come on, Burnley.
What was really interesting is that once she'd said this to me and I got it, if you'd have said to me before I met her, how do you look after your mental health? I'd have said I take antidepressants every day, which I do, and I see a psychiatrist. But now if you say to me, how to look after mental health, I go through all these things. And my psychiatrist and my antidepressants are up here rather than central.
Amazing.
So,
and you take that everywhere with you just to remind you?
Just what happens is when if I feel a plunge coming on, sometimes it doesn't work, but if I feel a plunge coming on, I get my jam jar out. I've got a drawn version of it as well with all the things.
Amazing.
The things in it. So like the first one is FFF, Fiona Family Friends.
Brilliant.
If I'm starting to plunge, I think, right, I need to lean on people. I need to tell Fiona. I need to not be horrible to her, which I can be when I'm depressed.
Yeah.
I need to check in on the kids. I need to maybe think of a friend I've not spoken to for ages. And then I've ticked that. And then I go into meaningful activity, do something.
Wow.
Then I go into exercise. And if I'm so depressed I can't face going out, I'll just walk up and down the stairs for 20 minutes. Music. I listen. Don't read newspapers. Read a book. Don't listen to the news. Listen to music. These are just things that I've found help me have good mental health when I'm feeling like my mental health is bad.
Amazing, Alastair, because we work in the same world. When you have a tool like that, you know what I mean? Like you've given us there a process, and I think when you logical people like ourselves that see stuff like that, that's a brilliant thing for you to share with us. Thanks.
Well, the other guy, the other guy I met on this through rugby, who I wrote about in my book Winners, is Andy McCann. I don't know if you guys have ever met Andy McCann. He worked with the Welsh rugby team when Wales were really good.
Geez, that's a long time ago now.
They could do with him back at the moment.
Have you a number for him?
Get on to Stephen Jones.
Get Stephen Jones and himself to give Warren a call.
He's in New Zealand now, isn't he?
Yeah.
But so I think that you can. This is why I always look back on the Lions tour with kind of fondness, because if you're in an experience like that, for all the shit that goes on around it, and all the shit that was coming my way, I learned a lot from talking to other people. Yeah. And I learned a lot from in watching Clive and the other coaches, and there were tricky relationships, and you could learn from what they do. And I think above all, what you learn is that, and this is another lesson, another maybe thing that these two young fly halves need to be told. When they're thinking about it in 30 years' time, they're not going to remember something that the Irish Independent wrote about. Yeah. They're not going to remember it. They're going to remember whether they made it and whether they played and whether they won and whether it was great.
Yeah. It's all about perspective and being an older player, and somebody like yourself having them in the squad will help with that, which you'd say, Clive Woodward, you kind of have to take your hat off to him, because bringing you in was fairly left field, but actually the experience you might have given some of those players was really, really beneficial. Dunners, you said
that's what I feel about that whole tour, Alastair. It was just ahead of its time with everything he did. Like, everyone gave out about him bringing 45 players. The following tour, they brought the exact same numbers, and he was really clever.
And had as many injuries.
Yeah, and they did.
But they split the camp, remember, though, Dunners.
But of course, but honestly, Tommy, think about it. That's actually very smart, because what New Zealand wanted us to do was go South Island, North Island, South Island, North Island. And he just went, no, hold on, they're good players. I'm going to base them down there. They're a better team, and I'm going to put them up in Auckland. We were down in Manawatui, myself and all the Driftwood singing.
What was that? What was that place we went on? One of my best memories of Donncha, Tommy, was on the bus where was it Rotorua?
Rotorua, the place that smells like rotten eggs.
And we were going on, and this guy was doing the guided tour, and he was doing the commentary, and you'd have thought this was the most beautiful place in the world. And then up pipes Donncha from the back of the house. If it's so great, why does it smell like the worst fart that's ever been let out?
It was funny though. We were down that South Island, and people were coming up to us, and they were like, "Where's Johnny Wilkinson? Where's Paul O'Connell? Where's Brian O'Driscoll?" And we were like, "We haven't seen him in about 3 weeks."
But here's Alastair Campbell.
Yeah. But Alastair, you're right. I think what you said about Jack there and Sam Prendergast, I think you're right. No one will care what the paper said or any of the people from outside, but it's the relationships you'll remember. And I remember someone telling me that, you burn the medals, burn the caps. It's the bonds, you know what I mean, that you can pick up the phone and chat to someone that you shared an experience with.
And above all, I think, is how you use it. Because I think there's a danger with sports people, athletes, because they retire so young. There's a danger that I see this a lot with soldiers as well. They then get trapped in living in a past. Okay, what I think is you have those relationships, but it's about how you then take them into the future. You do it relentlessly with me, Donncha, by every week asking me to do something for you, right? So it's how you take that, and then you take it into the future.
Very good. Listen, Dunners, well, we appreciate you harassing Alastair for this one. Fair play to you, because I do want to get onto the match this weekend, Dunners. What you've got your finger
No,
up there.
I'm just very interested. If you don't mind us asking, look, the podcast with Rory is brilliant. I'd recommend everyone to listen to it. If you want an in-depth side, if you want the depth of thinking, but just your own view, Alastair.
Bit above our level.
Yeah. Well, yours for sure, Tommy, no doubt. And when you mentioned cricket there, I was thinking to myself, Alastair, Tommy's club Ulster would be better off playing cricket at the moment. They're brutal. But from an outside view and someone that has vast history, how do you see Ireland at the moment, Alastair? What's your view on Ireland from an outside lens?
I'd say good. I think your political system is sometimes outsiders find it as a bit of a struggle to understand what are these parties really about, what's the difference, what's all this sort of swapping Taoiseach and what have you. I think I found some of the race stuff that's kind of been bubbling up recently. I was actually in Ireland that time when you had that sort of terrible
the Dublin
stuff
riots.
happen, and it was
so
horrible.
Embarrassing.
And I saw a really unpleasant thing on social media the other week of a young kid haranguing this Ukrainian guy on a bus, and there's too much of that stuff.
Yeah.
You've got to get right on top of that. But listen, I think Ireland's got a really good reputation around the world. I really do. And that's partly historic, okay, but I think it's also because you've got yourself into a pretty good place. So I think Ireland, I'd be pretty confident. Frankly, post-Brexit Ireland is doing better than post-Brexit Britain, put it that way.
Yeah. Well, we always knew you made bad decisions.
Do you see like the divide between North and South? Because listen, you run a very much political podcast. Do you see that there is still the love for Northern Ireland within the UK and the new government? And what way do you see that the future?
Yeah, look, I think there is. I think within the British population as a whole, I think partly because Northern Ireland is relatively peaceful and stable, people probably don't think about it as much as they did. And when they thought about it in the past, it was maybe in a negative light because of the violence and what have you. But I think the sense of the threat to the Union, which I think was at its height when Scottish independence looked like it was peaking, and particularly post-Brexit, the Scots thinking, what on earth have we done now? But I think that has peaked. Yeah. And so I think the Union feels quite strong. And I've got to be honest with you, whenever I'm going to Ireland at the moment, I think the Irish are feeling, do we really want that? Do we really want that thing coming in here? So I think it sort of feels a bit stronger than it was.
It's huge question marks. But listen, whatever is happening at the minute with the rugby team, it's bloody working. The two of them are working very well together against Scotland this weekend. So give us a rundown. Born in Yorkshire, which you're telling us, but a proud Scottish man. Where? How come?
Well, both my parents were Scots, and I grew up in a very, my dad was from the Hebrides, and he was a vet, and he moved south. My mum was from Ayrshire. She was a farmer's daughter from Ayrshire. And we just lived in a very, very Scottish family. I'm not a God person, but we went every Sunday to the Scottish Presbyterian Church in Bradford. I learned the bagpipes with my brother from the age of 6. Every single holiday I ever had as a kid was in Scotland. My brother ended up in the Scots Guards. It was just a very, very Scottish upbringing. I never felt English, ever. I supported Yorkshire at cricket because Scotland didn't, they do now have a team, but there was not much to, so I supported Keighley at Rugby League and Great Britain. I've always felt very British, but Scottish way, I've just never felt English. It's really quite weird. When England are playing football, I feel no more emotional attachment than I do if I'm watching France. Wow. I've just never felt that, even though I support an English football team. It's kind of weird, but I think quite a lot of Anglo-Scots are like that. People who are second generation maybe feel it even more than the parents.
So how are you looking for the weekend? Have you been up to Murrayfield before? Do you go often?
Yeah. I've been to Murrayfield many times, and I mean, what is it? 10 in a row.
Yeah, it's not 10. It's 11. In 11 years, we've won 10.
One draw.
I'm not too sure was there a draw, but yeah, we've been kind of dominant over the last decade.
Rugby supporters don't really come to this podcast for accurate statistics.
Yeah.
No, okay.
We just tell stories, Alastair.
Stick to your own pod for stats, Alastair, will you?
Well, Scotland have won the last 9 games against Ireland, as you know.
Yeah. That's all we ever hear.
That's a stat that's not correct. But we know that it's always a ferocious battle between the two of them. And Scotland are going to break that duck.
They will eventually.
And they have a hell of a squad at them, a team. I mean, their backline is so dangerous.
Yeah,
but
it is.
The big issue is, can they get parity with the Irish pack? And at home,
hard.
the 16th man, can that make the difference this weekend? It's going to be a hell of a game.
I think it will be. I watched the game against. I didn't see your game, but I watched Scotland's game against Italy, and I thought they played really, really well in parts. Yeah. But the one thing that Scotland have got to have is Finn Russell absolutely on it. I'm not sure he was that on it. Which is probably a good sign, because he's going to come back and think, right, this time I'm really on it. I've never really got this thing about crowns. Is it like you've both played at that level? Does it genuinely make a difference? So you talk about the 16th man. Does that genuinely make a difference?
I believe it. Like, you're talking to Donncha here, who rants and raves about Thomond Park.
Well, Thomond's
never
different.
talks.
Thomond's different. No,
but
Alistair,
I do
we need to
think
get
because
you...
it changes the momentum. When the momentum is going with you, you feel this swell inside you, absolutely. But when it's quiet, it feels eerie. You start.
So it's a disadvantage.
You overthink when it's quiet.
That's
so when you're not going well,
yeah,
because you start overthinking things. You start hearing the crowd, what they're saying to you. Particularly whenever I was on the wing, but whenever the crowd is rocking, you've got this buzz around the stadium. Then you just seem to flow in it.
Yeah,
I believe, anyway.
But that's why I think it was. I think some player, you look at somebody like Roy Keane. I think he thrived on the crowd being against him.
Yeah.
So probably played better away than he did at home. Didn't like the whole prawn sandwich thing and all that stuff.
That's what he said, exactly. Yeah, and he loved being the villain.
A bit like Ronan O'Gara, your mate. He was exactly like that.
What a star, Rog! What a man! What a man! But I'll tell you what. I'll tell you the other thing. I once, one of the highlights of my life was the first soccer aid. I tried to get Rog and he couldn't do it because his coach wouldn't let him away. And in the end, Alfie did it.
Yeah, no way. Where would you have played Rog? Honestly.
Alongside me and Maradona.
You played?
I did, yeah.
Were you not media manager?
Like of all time.
I played, Tommy.
I know you played. I saw it. It was incredible.
I made my international debut, age 49, in a team with Maradona, Dunga, Desai, etc.
You were
Anyway,
some man,
what was really funny, what was really interesting, was the game was at Old Trafford, and on the day before, I got this guy called Pete Boyle, he's a massive Man United fan, and he writes a lot of their songs. Okay,
yeah,
and
brilliant.
I got him to come into the hotel and write songs for all the players. And I was talking to Peter Schmeichel. So there's Peter Schmeichel, who's been the United goalkeeper, and I was telling him the lyrics of some of the songs that were sung the whole time. He had no idea. He said he just didn't hear them.
He's too
didn't hear them.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, like I'd agree with that. It is this kind of stadium noise is different, but there is an emotion of it that I think allows you to perform better than yourself. So I don't feel the crowd aids you in any way. Of course, it could maybe influence referees and stuff like that. But
yeah.
The
thing about the Scotland rugby crowd, they're not. I mean, the Scotland football crowd, I can get it. You know, you go to a Scotland. That is good. I went to the Euros, and even when they were getting battered by, they got hammered by Germany, but Scotland fans are pretty amazing. But rugby, I think you do get periods where if it goes a bit flat, the crowd goes flat.
Yeah. And you do have that
again in the players' heads.
The track is kind of on the side of the pitch in Murrayfield too, which impacts it.
One thing they have, Alastair, and I think you'd be quite proud of it, I do think they have one of the greatest anthems and performed in one of the most theatrical ways with the bagpipes
on the
played
roof.
On the roof. That is amazing, isn't it?
Well, Donncha, I'm at the top of my house. Do you want me to give it a go?
Yes, please.
We would love. But before you do, though, honestly, we appreciate your time. But you played them at John Prescott's funeral. Can you just tell us a bit about that? Like that, obviously, friends and relationships that go before. But to be asked to do something like that is a bit unique.
Well, I've played. I do play a lot of funerals, to be honest. I played at Tessa Giles' funeral as well, because she was, although she sounded very English, because a bit like me, she lived most of her life in England. She was born in Aberdeen. But the thing about John that a lot of people don't know, because he was well known from being the MP for Hull, he was actually born in Wales. So they asked, and they wanted a bit of Wales in the service, so they asked me to play the Welsh national anthem.
Amazing.
And it's really interesting. The Irish. I think your anthem, I think you should get rid of it and have the Fields of Athenry, to be absolutely frank. And
there you go, like, look at you. Yeah, like, you can get a headline if you want to, and then he goes and throws this one up. Between yourself looking for a change of the anthem, and do you know what Tommy wants? Tommy wants Michael D. Higgins on a Segway to speed him up going around the players.
Well,
he's such a star. So, but isn't it, because the Bagpipes, you've only got 9 notes, right? So you can't do God Save the King, because it's a complete dirge anyway. You wouldn't want to play that at the
because it's only one note. Boring.
Exactly. Swing Low, Sweet Chariot is just hideous.
Yeah.
If I was playing for regular, that would put me off.
Yeah.
And then Flower of Scotland's brilliant. The Welsh national anthem is brilliant.
Beautiful.
Fantastic.
And I do think Fields of Athenry. The other thing about Fields of Athenry, it's got because Celtic fans sing that as well.
Of course.
Come on, will you give us a rattle of it?
Okay, I'll give you Flower of Scotland and Fields of Athenry. How about that?
Oh, you
wow, double whammy.
Yeah.
Alastair,
okay.
thank you so much. Yes! Go on, Campbell!
So for people who are listening, we can't hear it either, but Alastair Campbell is proudly playing the bagpipes in the background. And send them homeward to think again.
Those days are past now.
I think he's gone on to the Fields of Athenry. Yeah, in the background, Alastair Campbell is on top of the stadium in Murrayfield playing the bagpipes. Whenever you said he was going to go to the top of the house, I think you're right. How lonely are the fields of Athenry.
Lie the fields of Athenry,
where
once we watched the small free birds,
free birds fly. Oh, baby, let the free birds fly. He's still going.
Yes!
Well done. He's finished for people who are listening now. I know you couldn't hear.
Alastair, I'm telling you, sorry you haven't got the headphones in, but I'm telling you, there's a special place in Limerick called Thomond Park. I know we chatted about stadiums, but you playing the Fields of Athenry, we have to make it happen. If Ron O'Gara comes back at any point as a coach to Munster for his first game, which, yeah, well, that's what we're all hoping. But if he was to, could you lead him out?
We'll do it.
Yeah,
as well. And we'll. I tell you what, I love watching Roger's interviews in French as well.
Ah, incredible.
French/English, yeah.
Amazing.
Alastair, listen, thank you so much. Of course, people want to check
you
it
noticed
out. The
one of
Rest
the
is
drones
Politics
was double
podcast.
toning. Did you notice that?
Yeah, I noticed the double tone on that left bag. Yeah, it was a little bit off. Alastair, can I just say, honestly, not only for thank you for joining us on the pod, but just being an incredible teammate. We were blessed to be on that tour with you in 2005. Stupidly, some people weren't clever enough to spot what a beauty you were. The ones that did got a friend and a relationship that we'll have forever. And honestly, so thankful to you. Continued success. Your pod is brilliant. Everything you always do is brilliant. And you're a top man and we love you for it.
Donncha, you're a star. Tommy, lovely to see you again. And
Alastair,
do look after him, because he needs a lot of help. He's a lot of help.
All the good ones do, AC. You beauty.
Thank
Thank you, Alastair. Really appreciate it. Cheers. Thanks, man. Dunners, what a legend. Fair play to you getting Alastair. He's actually, like, I listen to his podcast as well. Obviously, Tony Blair's press secretary, but you lads just seem to get on so well in the Lions tour. It's unreal.
Yeah, it was great because it was also fractured, Tommy. And I think there's learning there for people. Like, genuinely, I know he had unbelievable messages on mental health and actually how to conduct yourself in interviews. And I think there's real gold in it. But he was always like that. Like, I remember him telling us, you should journal. Like, he was talking about journaling before it was even a thing, you know, and he's great company. He's super company, and I really appreciate him coming on and having a crack with us.
I loved him saying, like, you know, yes, you just don't be bland in interviews, but, you know, if you want to get a headline, and he was, you know, telling us all about his jam jar and everything else, and then bam, I think that Ireland need to change the national anthem to the Fields of Athenry.
Unbelievable. You know, he just gave us a listen. But yeah, to be fair, when it comes to media and spinning and making sure a message comes out, he's playing senior hurling where everyone else, I'm telling you, is there with like a hockey stick.
Listen, well done. Thanks very much for getting him on the podcast. It was good fun.
Fingers really crossed. A great weekend, Tommy. Here we go, fella.
Fingers crossed. And absolutely remember, we have got a live show. If you are listening now, it'll be a great day out. We've got some special guests already lined up. Really excited about that. And it's going to be great. So go on to Ticketmaster, check out the Offload. It's in the 3 Olympia on the 5th of March. And we'd love to have as many people there as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. A great night. Tommy, have a great weekend.
Cheers, Dunners.